Thank you for attending Crain Construction Safety Orientation. Here we will provide you with a brief overview of Crain Construction and our safety expectations for all employees working on our projects. This training will address general safety rules and practices, accident and emergency procedures, and employee and employer expectations. These requirements not only apply to yourself, but all individuals entering the job site. We understand that not every item concerning safety can be covered during orientation, but we will cover the basics to ensure you are all well equipped to start work on the project. If you have additional questions about a specific safety hazard or policy not discussed today, please contact the site supervisor for guidance. Crain Construction has called Nashville home for over 90 years, and has completed over 4,500 projects in the greater Nashville area. Here at Crain, we believe every project starts with a strong foundation. One of the most important pieces of that foundation is safety. Here at Crain, we believe safety begins at the top, but also involves a daily commitment from everyone working on our projects. Crain Construction considers accident prevention to be a key element of successful daily operations. Here at Crain, we strive to provide everyone on our sites with a safe and healthy workplace. We also expect everyone to participate in this process, by ensuring all operations and activities are performed in the safest manner possible, and consistent with quality construction, environmental safety, and best management practices. Here at Crain, we have a term, achievable goal. We expect all of our employees to keep one goal a top priority every day when they come to work on our projects, achieve an incident-free work environment and ensure all employees go home the same way they arrived to the job site. The realization of this goal depends heavily upon you, the employee. You can help be a part of this goal through active participation, coordination, and cooperation with your companies, and Crain's safety and health policies. A commitment for safety starts with each of us, and here at Crain we have a motto: no job or task is so important or urgent that it cannot be performed in the safest manner possible. We expect all employees and management to incorporate this motto into their work pre-task planning and during their active work operations. Supervision plays a key role on the job site from the foreman, crew leaders, and superintendents. These individuals are expected to coordinate and oversee the safety efforts of their employees, OSHA standards and regulations, industry best practices, and site-specific safety policies for this project. The next few slides will provide you with a breakdown of a few of the most common hazard areas we experience on a day-to-day basis. Although you may not be responsible for the implementation of each task, it is important that you understand the safety regulations involved, as hazards from other trades can impact all personnel on site. Crain requires employees to wear the following items at a minimum while working on our job sites. These items reflect our sense of professionalism and industry-leading standards. Therefore, all employees are required to wear a minimum of long work pants, work boots, and shirts, with at least a 4-inch sleeve. Clothing illustrating, wording, or pictures that could be considered profane are strictly prohibited. Personal protective equipment is a requirement while working on the project, and is an essential component to preventing our employees from being exposed to hazards. The minimum requirement for PPE on the project is long pants, work boots, high-visibility clothing, hard hat, and safety glasses. Hard hats worn on the project are required to meet the industry head protection standards, set forth in ANSI Z89.1. Hard hats are to be worn at all times, by any individual entering the job site. No non-approved items are allowed to be worn underneath your hard hat. Examples include beanies, or ball caps. Safety glasses are required to be worn by all individuals exposed to eye hazards. This eyewear must meet the ANSI Z87.1 standard. If employees choose to wear prescription glasses, they must meet the ANSI Z87.1 standard. These requirements include shatter resistance and protective side shields. If employees are working with items that could possibly strike the face, they are required to wear a face shield, along with approved safety glasses at a minimum. Examples requiring a face shield include grinding, chipping, or working with hazardous chemicals. Specialty work may require additional items, such as a welder's helmet. If you have a question regarding which type of face protection you will be needing, consult your supervisor. Hand injuries are one of the leading causes of incidents in the construction industry. It is very important that employees understand the hazards associated with the tasks they are performing. Different gloves are used for different tasks. The most common types of gloves are broken down into 3 categories: nitrile, latex, and coated gloves. Nitrile and latex gloves are best used for chemical hazards such as concrete burns, acidity, and other chemically reactive substances. Coated gloves have a wide range of uses, including cut resistance, shock absorbance, pinching hazards, cold weather, heat resistance, and electrical hazards. Before performing a task, you need to ask yourself, what hazards am I exposed to? This question will help you pick out the right glove for the task. Additional PPE can be required depending on the task being performed. Individuals performing specialty tasks should be prepared to use items such as earplugs, respirators, gloves, face shields, safety-toed boots, or additional class high-visibility clothing. These example forms of PPE are required to be worn by all employees working in or around warranting conditions. Additional PPE can also be required when directed by employer supervision or crane management. In order to have a successful project, we have to keep our sites clean. At Crain Construction, work areas are expected to be kept clean to prevent hazards such as slips, trips, and falls. Trash, debris, and scrap materials must be regularly placed in waste containers or removed from the work area. Every employee on the job site is required to periodically clean up their work area and ensure all items are disposed of by the end of a shift. All stairs and exit paths are also required to be kept clear of any trash, debris, or excess material. We cannot accomplish this task without your help, so do your part, and take pride in your job site. Fire hazards can present themselves in many forms, especially when it comes to hot work. Hot work is defined as any work that generates a spark or flame. Examples of this include welding, cutting, grinding, and tar kettles. Crain Construction requires that all employees follow our hot work procedure. The proper procedure includes the following steps. 1. Notify management of hot work activities. 2. Complete a hot work permit. 3. Establish a fire watch. This individual must be dedicated to only performing fire or watch duties. 4. Ensure a charged and inspected fire extinguisher is present in the area. Additional questions to ask yourself before work begins include, what are my above and below hazards? Do I need multiple fire watches? Is my extinguisher charged and inspected? And finally, have I protected surrounding material and employees from hazards? Flammable solvents, fuels, and other flammable liquids must be stored in approved metal safety cans and be properly labeled as to their contents. Plastic fuel cans are not allowed on this project. If fuel is being stored on the project, a fire extinguisher must also be located within 30 feet. Crain will also not allow any open fires on an active project site. Employees planning to use power tools on the job site must ensure they are implementing a well-thought-out plan before use. All tools shall be inspected before use to ensure they are in proper working order. If a tool is recognized to be damaged, it must be tagged and removed from service. Some tools can be repaired, but only when they are repaired by a qualified individual. No tools are to be altered or modified to perform a task. Individuals who plan to use specialty tools such as powder-actuated tools must also be properly trained and maintain proof of training while working on site. Falls continue to be one of the leading causes of fatalities on construction projects. Workers performing activities at a height of 6 feet or more must be protected from falling by use of guardrails, safety nets, personal fall protection systems, or other approved systems complying with OSHA regulations. Crain Construction has a zero-tolerance policy when it comes to fall protection. If employees are observed exposing themselves to a fall hazard, they will be removed from the project. This is a serious work hazard and every precaution should be taken, especially in the pre-planning phase. Discuss this hazard in detail during your pre-task planning session. Supervisors should ensure that all employees at risk of a fall hazard fully understand the implementation of the fall protection system. If a fall hazard is recognized at any point throughout the day, you should secure the area from a safe distance and notify management immediately. Guard railing on our job sites will be constructed to the following requirements set forth by OSHA. All guard rails must consist of a top rail, mid-rail, and toe board. Top rails must be installed and maintained between 39 inches and 45 inches in height. Mid-rails must be installed at 21 inches. Toe boards at the floor must be at least 3.5 inches. If wire rope is to be used as a guardrail, rope shall be at least 1/4 inch thick, with a deflection no more than 3 inches from the horizontal. Wire rope is also to be flagged every 6 feet. Guardrails are never to be removed without permission from a crane superintendent or management employee. Any employee found to have tampered with or removed a fall protection system without permission for crane management shall be immediately removed from the project. In some cases, not all fall hazards can be eliminated from the work process. Crain recognizes that fall protection is an effective tool to implement but can also be a dangerous one, if used improperly. When using fall protection, the first step is to ensure you have had proper training on what you are using. If you have not had training on the fall protection system you are attempting to use, you should not be using it to work on the job site, until you have had the necessary training. Once you have established training requirements, ensure you have an adequate anchor point. OSHA states, you need an anchor point capable of withstanding a load of at least 5,000 pounds. Next, you will need to verify you have the correct lanyard or device for the task. The last step is to make sure all devices are given a final inspection. Anchors, harnesses, and connecting devices should be verified to not contain any excessive wear or damages before use. Fall protection systems are broken down into two categories, fall restraint and fall arrest. The first method ensures personnel are restrained from fall exposure. Some examples of this system include a restraint lanyard, or a rope grab. Examples of these items are shown in the upper right-hand corner of this slide. The second method ensures personnel can be arrested, or slowed down, from the forces implied on the body from falling. Some examples of this system include a retractable, otherwise commonly known as a yo-yo. The second common item is a shock-absorbing lanyard. Examples of these items are shown in the lower right corner of this slide. Using fall protection equipment can save your life, but working to implement elimination items such as guardrail or a hard barricade system should always be the main goal of all employees. Ladders used on the project are to meet the following requirements. Before you begin a task, ensure you are using the correct ladder for the job. For example, if you are working in a tall area, make sure you have a ladder that is adequately equipped to reach your working area safely. If you are accessing another level of a building, ensure you have an extension ladder, as A-frame ladders cannot be used to access other levels of a structure. The next step is to inspect the ladder. Employees should always make sure the ladder is in good shape, and has all of the necessary tags in place. Employees should never modify or alter a ladder's configuration. A few final tips when working on a ladder. Always face the ladder when working and never stand on the top step, or top cap of the ladder. Extension ladders are a very useful tool, but if used improperly, can also be very dangerous. It is important when using an extension ladder, to keep your body within the rails, to prevent accidental displacement. This is commonly referred to as the belt buckle rule. The rule states that an employee should never move their body too much in one direction, as to take their belt buckle outside of the space between the rails. Climbing an extension ladder should be done using 3 points of contact at all times. When traveling to another surface, an extension ladder must extend a minimum of 3 feet above that working surface, and maintain a 4-to-1 angle. There are also additional hazards, sometimes those we cannot see. It is important for all employees to pay attention to their surroundings before extending a ladder, especially when overhead electrical hazards are present. All ladders being used around electricity should be made of non-conductive material. Crain Construction requires all of its subcontractors to employ ground fault circuit interrupters, or GFCIs, when using any electrical equipment. It is the responsibility of all contractors to ensure power sources have a GFCI incorporated to the system. All electrical tools, equipment, and machinery must be inspected daily. If a tool is recognized as defective or damaged, it must be tagged and removed from service until it can be repaired by a qualified individual. Electrical panels must be properly covered with no exposed energized parts. An example would be a junction box. If a junction box has energized wires, they must be capped, and a cover must be in place on the box. If work needs to happen on a system, employees need to verify that all energized parts exposed to employees are turned off and locked out. Crain Construction has a zero-tolerance policy regarding lockout-tagout. Any employee found to be working on an energized system will be immediately removed from the project. When working around items such as high-voltage lines, employees are required to keep a safe minimum distance and incorporate a warning system to the work area. There may be times where work on or around energized equipment is needed, but this must be coordinated with crane management before work begins. Scaffolding is a very useful tool and can be found on about any construction project. Safety when using these items is at the utmost importance, and Crain Construction expects all employees and subcontractors to abide by all proper safe work practices. Scaffold must comply with applicable OSHA regulations before being used. Anyone attempting to use scaffold must be trained and authorized by their employer. Each scaffold on site must be tagged to indicate its current condition. Finally, before scaffold can be used, it must be inspected by a competent person. Excavation safety. Before digging commences, all utilities must be properly located using items such as ground-penetrating radar or hydrovacuuming. If a utility is known to be near or in a trenching area, it must be located by hand before using mechanical means, such as an excavator. Before working in a trench, the trench must be inspected by a competent person. The competent person shall determine the level of safety measures for employees working in the trench. The competent person is also required to inspect the trench on a daily basis, before employees are allowed to enter. Employees accessing a trench that is greater than 4 feet in depth are required to maintain access-egress points every 25 feet of lateral travel. Spoil piles shall be kept a minimum distance of 2 feet or more away from excavation edges. Excavation and trenching operations must be in accordance with OSHA regulations. Do not enter or work in an excavation or trench if you are not trained or authorized. Do not enter an excavation or trench 5 foot or greater in depth that does not include protective measures to prevent soil collapse, such as shoring, shielding, sloping, or benching. Mobile equipment used on the site, such as forklifts, area lifts, scissor lifts, and earth-moving equipment, must be inspected daily. Operators are required to ensure all safety devices are in proper working order before beginning work. Any equipment found to be defective or damaged shall not be used until proper repairs can be made. Forklift operators must be authorized by their employer and must always maintain proof of certification while operating equipment on the job site. Extreme caution should always be taken when working around mobile equipment. Employees planning to work around equipment should always ensure eye contact has been made between themselves and the driver before entering the operating zone. Only trained and authorized workers shall be allowed to use mobile elevating work platforms. Workers must keep their feet on the floor of the platform at all times and are not allowed to stand on the railing systems. Before beginning operations, safety chains and gates must be latched in the secured position. Personal fall protection equipment shall always be used when operating a boom lift. All cranes on site must be maintained in strict accordance with OSHA regulations. Before a crane is allowed to work on site, the following minimum pre-construction criteria must be met. First, certification for the operator and crane designated for use must be provided to Crain Construction. Second, crane operators are responsible for inspecting their equipment daily to ensure all safety measures are met and devices are functioning properly. Finally, all rigging slings and equipment shall be inspected by a competent person before use. Cranes and hoisting continued. Operators are required to set up work control zones to notify surrounding workers of hazard areas. Workers are never allowed to be under a live overhead load. All rigging of loads shall be completed by a qualified rigger. All signaling shall be performed by a qualified signal person. Proof of certification for both rigging and signaling must always be made available while working on the job site. Confined space entry operations shall be in accordance with OSHA regulations. All confined spaces on site shall be deemed permit-required confined spaces until proper inspection criteria have been met. Only trained and authorized workers shall enter a confined space. Confined spaces must be evaluated daily by a competent person to ensure all existing hazards have been mitigated or eliminated. Permit-required confined spaces shall have the permit posted in a readily accessible area during work operations. If employees are planning to enter a space, proper rescue procedures need to be in place, such as a rescue team or a tripod retrieval system. All crews involved in activities which generate silica dust, such as concrete cutting, drilling, and grinding, must implement exposure controls to protect workers from airborne respirable silica. Employers can either use a control method described in Table 1 of OSHA's silica standard, or they can measure workers' exposure to silica and independently decide which dust controls work best to limit exposures in their workplaces to the permissible exposure limit, PEL. Table 1 matches common construction activities with effective dust control methods, such as using water to keep dust from becoming airborne or using a vacuum collection system to capture dust. In addition to water and/or vacuum controls, some activities might require the use of respirators per OSHA's Table 1. Employers who correctly follow Table 1 of OSHA's silica standard are not required to measure workers' exposure to silica from those tasks and are not subject to the PEL. Subcontractors are required to have a written site-specific exposure control plan when performing operations that generate silica dust on this project. Safety data sheets are required for all chemicals entering the job site, All chemical products on the site must also be stored in secure containers, and properly labeled with indicators of the product inside, and its associated hazards. Contractor employees must not report for duty under the influence of any drug, or alcohol, or even legally prescribed drugs and medicines, which will in any way adversely affect their working ability, alertness, coordination, response or adversely affect the safety of others on the project site. Crain Construction requires every contractor to prohibit the use, sale, possession, or distribution of drugs when working on our projects. Crain Construction also reserves the right to test every employee involved in an accident, incident, or near miss. If you observe any employees attempting to elicit drugs to on-site individuals, you should immediately report this to your supervisor, or Crain management. All accidents, incidents, and near misses shall be immediately reported to your on-site supervisor, or Crain Construction project personnel. Our process of reporting helps us understand an issue, and hopefully correct the problem, before it happens again. We want employees to understand they will never be reprimanded for reporting an incident. With your help, we hope to achieve a daily goal of 0 accidents, or incidents. All contractors, and their employees, shall take the necessary precautions to protect the public, the facilities, and the nearby tenants of the project, from any hazards generated during their scope of work. All construction operations, including the storage of materials, shall be isolated from the public, to the greatest extent possible. We expect all employees on the job site to be kind and courteous. Items such as obscenities, vulgar language, and/or inappropriate gestures are strictly prohibited. Emergencies are not planned as a what if, but a when. All emergencies shall follow a simple 3-step process when you recognize an emergency. First, stop working immediately. Second, evacuate the facility, or job site, through the nearest designated exit point. Third, meet at the primary rally point for the job site. If you are unable to reach the primary rally point for any reason, head to the nearest point where you are safely away from the hazard. Following these simple steps shall help ensure all employees are protected. Crain Construction expects its employees and subcontractors to conduct themselves in a manner that is consistent with the objectives of industry best practices and our organization's values. Our disciplinary action plan has been developed to ensure fair and effective arrangements exist for dealing with disciplinary matters. Minor faults will be dealt with informally by way of advice, coaching, counseling, or training as appropriate. When conduct does not meet acceptable standards, the employee will normally be given a verbal warning by the supervisor authorized to do so. If the offense is of a serious nature, or a further offense occurs while a formal verbal warning is still active, a written warning will be issued to the employee by the appropriate supervisor. If conduct remains unsatisfactory after the above actions, the discipline includes a 3 or more day suspension. If the employee still fails to meet the prescribed standards, or in the case of gross misconduct, termination of employment will normally result. Finally, the stages of the disciplinary process can be altered or elevated, depending on the seriousness of the offense. If an employee commits an egregious or immediate safety hazard, Crain Construction reserves the right to immediately remove the employee from the job site. In addition to our disciplinary policy, Crain Construction has established a list of inviolable rules, which if broken, can result in the immediate removal from the job site. These rules include, but are not limited to, horseplay, fighting, or creating a disturbance, possession of a weapon and/or firearm, use or possession of drugs or alcohol, fall protection, electrical/lockout tagout, trench/excavation, and confined spaces. These rules are in place to ensure all employees are protected from preventable hazards. We expect all Crain employees and subcontractors to follow these rules whenever working on our construction sites. In conclusion, we are excited to have you starting here on our project, and look forward to having you help us create another leading-class building for our clients. Crain Construction believes in providing a safe and healthy working environment for all employees working on our sites. All functions and operations shall be performed in the safest manner possible, consistent with good construction, environmental, and health safety practices. We hope you have learned a little bit more about the general industry requirements and the expectations we have for everyone working on the project. Thank you, and have a safe day.